Hello world, your votes have been tabulated, and today I'm going to talk about this suggestion from the Guess Who It Is 32456. They say, I'd like to know what your opinion is on the topic of stem cell research, along with the ideas of cloning, etc. Some people think it's morally wrong, others believe we can clone animals for a food source. What are your thoughts? I've been marginally familiar with the issue of stem cell research for a while, but I went ahead and asked the Googles what specifically a stem cell is, and my understanding is that a stem cell is any cell that can split indefinitely. So I think that means that from one stem cell you can get as many other stem cells that are identical to it as you would like, and also stem cells can be influenced to become a different type of cell. And because of that flexibility, stem cells have all sorts of potential medical and scientific applications. And most forms of stem cell research aren't controversial in the slightest. You have what's called adult stem cell research, which is research of stem cells that come from adults. You have amniotic stem cell research, which is research of stem cells that come from amniotic fluid, you know, the fluid that you swim in when you're a baby, still inside of your mother. The controversy doesn't begin until you start talking about embryonic stem cell research. That is, stem cells that come from human embryos. See, all stem cells are flexible. They're able to be influenced to become other types of cells. But embryonic stem cells are particularly special because they can be influenced to become any other type of cell. The only problem is the use of embryonic stem cells requires the destruction of a human embryo, which in pro-life circles is seen as the destruction of a human life. So they're pretty adamantly opposed. Now, advances in technology could make this entire controversy bunk. Scientists are pursuing some promising leads as to how they might be able to get stem cells that are just as flexible as embryonic stem cells, either without using embryos or just without destroying embryos. But in the meantime, I am of the opinion that standing in the way of research it makes absolutely no sense. It's important to understand that these embryos were not created sexually. They were never inside of a woman's womb. They were created in a lab. So, I mean, this is a completely different thing from abortion. Someone who is opposed to embryonic stem cell research, though, would likely make the argument that a scientist making an embryo in a lab is trying to play God, and that that's not okay, that it's not okay to make an embryo for any purpose other than making a baby. Now, I don't agree with that. I think that the scales are still tipped on the side of morality when a scientist creates an embryo in a lab for the sake of advancing medical research that could improve the quality of life for millions of people. I don't agree with it, but I do understand the logic behind that argument. They believe that an embryo is a human life, and therefore the destruction of an embryo is tantamount to murder. That's simple, it's straightforward, I get it. There's a debate to be had there. What I don't get is a pro-life opposition to stem cell research on embryos left over from in vitro fertilization. If a woman would like to be pregnant, but she is having difficulty getting that way, she can go to a lab where a scientist will produce an embryo outside of her body and then implant it inside of her body and hope that that does the trick. And I'm pretty sure that in vitro fertilization is seen as okay by most pro-life circles, because, I mean, even though the embryo isn't being produced sexually, even though it is being made in a lab, it is still being made with the purpose of eventually becoming a baby. The thing about in vitro fertilization, though, is that they never know how many attempts it's going to take. So when they make the embryos, they are on the side of caution and usually make more than it requires before the woman gets preggers. As a result, there are lots of leftover embryos that are either discarded or just held on to until they expire, until they go bad. There is absolutely no reason that those embryos should not be used for stem cell research that could heal injuries, cure diseases, save people's lives, and to stand in the way of that, to stand in the way of something that could improve the quality of life for millions of people, I think is exactly the opposite of what it should mean to be pro-life. As for your other question about my thoughts on cloning and whether or not I think it would be okay to clone animals as a potential food source, I don't have time to get into that in detail here, but put simply, my opinion is that as long as my bacon still tastes like bacon, I don't care if my bacon is genetically identical to somebody else's bacon. I'm cool with it.
If you like what you just saw, if Dan put you in a state of awe, subscribe to him and click the orange button. It really, 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 really means something. If you do that, that'd be really cool.